The videos that you are about to watch are videos that have been shot in a previous setting. We decided to fluff them up a little bit to make them a little more current. So I hope you enjoy those. Once again, let me just say thank you for your continued work and investing in the lives of folks that are newly baptized here at Hillvue. I know that by now you're developing a stronger relationship with some of these folks, and there's a bond that you'll have with them that'll last all their days here at Hillvue, all your days here at Hillvue. So I appreciate your work and continued support of these. I know that you'll remember that as you start your session this week to pray and encourage your group to pray together, pray for one another. Know that you'll begin by asking about their time of reading and their time in the Word. See if they have questions or concerns. Once again, if they have questions that you can't answer, just get back with them on those answers. So you'll want to do that. There's a show that's on television that over the last couple of seasons I've been watching, and that show's called Alone. The show, if you've not seen it, they choose 10 individuals and they drop them in a wilderness island off the coast of Canada. And the premise of the show is to see who can stay there the longest, and they win. The one that stays the longest wins a cash prize and the right to say they beat the other competitors. Over the last couple of weeks, I've seen a person choose to what they call tap out, to give up and to come back to civilization. And one of those folks that tapped out, as they called it, decided to come back to their world, the world they had left. They decided to tap out because they had been there so long that they were lonely, and they missed their loved ones, and they missed talking to other individuals. And that's kind of the backdrop of our session for week 4, because we're talking about the blessed community. We're talking about what God has designed as the church. And so as you begin this session and an introduction into this session, you'll start talking about what it's like and what it's like to be lonely. They refer back to that Tom Hanks movie Castaway into the book, and so it's kind of a thought, and they ask a couple of questions there before they get to the Bible study itself. But when you start looking at Acts 1:8 and what Christ has called us to be in that, and then on top of that looking at Acts 2, the birth of the new church, I think what you're going to continue to be reminding your folks is that God has created us to know Him in a deep and personal way. And God has created us with community in mind, a community. And so as you begin looking at this Acts 2 verse, those verses 42 through 47, there's a lot of things there that you'll help them with and help them to understand this new church, this group of baptized believers that had come together as the early church. And it says there, verse 46, that every day they devoted themselves to meeting together. They liked to be around each other. As you look at pages 54 and 55 and start talking about what is the church and what is the purpose of the church, these are two important things. I know over the last few years I've worked with Kentucky Baptist Convention and worked with churches, and we know of one thing. There's a lot of churches, internal conflicts have caused people to walk away from a church. But I've also seen a lot of people walk away from the church because they were not part of the community. Sometimes the church didn't make them part, and sometimes they didn't want to be part of a community. And I just want to remind you of our task with Next Steps, and this is an important element for Next Steps, is that we want to help individuals that come through our sessions to better understand that they're part of the community at Hillvue. And we want to help them find their place of service, their place of encouragement, their place of blessing. But let's talk about the church for just a few minutes. And you'll see there's two main purposes of the church there at the top of page 55. And those two main purposes is to be a community of Christ, and they're to be followers of Christ who support and encourage and equip one another. And so you have the ability to invest in some other folks to be part of this purpose of the church. And so I appreciate that. But we also are to serve as representatives of God's kingdom. And so you're trying to show those folks that you're going to come in contact with this week the purpose of the church by first investing in them and then being a representation of the kingdom. And you can encourage them to be part of that. Remember last week we talked about the track, and so part of them being part of the church, if you will, is for them to be able to share the gospel. And you might ask who they're praying for, if they're praying for folks to come to Christ, or maybe they're praying for folks that have been part of the church and now they're not. And so we have that opportunity with Next Steps. So remember those two main purposes of the church, and help them to understand that. Remind them that God has created us with community in mind, and we're not built to be alone. That's why it was so hard for that person that tapped out last week on the loan. I know for me, some of the worst punishments I ever got was to stand in a corner. And you're standing in the corner by yourself looking at a wall, and the wall closes in on you. You see, God built us with community in mind, and He built us to be in community with Him, but also to be in community with other folks. I alluded to this just a minute ago, working with the Kentucky Baptist Convention, and as a consultant, one of the things that I always kind of watched was a church, a group of people. And at the end of the service, I would time and see how long it took that group of people to leave the worship center. Because that tells you about community. You see, even in our church, if you watch at the end of a service, you'll see groups of people stand together and have a conversation. And that just means that they're in community, that they're sharing life, they're sharing issues. Help your folks around that table to become a community. And they'll become a community as they begin next week. We'll talk about this in next week's session, talk about becoming part of a small group or a Bible study class. But help that group that you have together to connect together as community, and that will help them. The weekly activities there on page 57, beginning on page 57, kind of starts off with the same type of thing with the reading plan, and gives you two ways to interact. One is 2 pictures of the church, and 2 practices of the church is the other one. Find that one that best fits your group. Encourage them to be part of worship. Also a reminder, if you have a person that doesn't get to session 4, reach out to them really soon and check on them and show them grace and love as you have already. Help them to see what community looks like. Model for them what community looks like. And so that's the encouragement I have for you. As you look through the rest of the assignment, put that together. There again, as you wind up with this session, know that we appreciate what you're doing and the impact that Next Steps will make. God will use your work to develop community. And so I trust you're in community. I trust that the community that you have with the Lord is been a blessing to you as well. Once again, thank you for your work. Thank you for being part of this group. And thanks for your service.